Hey everyone, you are listening to Animalia Hour on KGVM. We are a group based in Bozeman, Montana. We talk about our relationship to other animals, and we hope through this podcast to inspire you to reject animal exploitation and use by living vegan. I'm Kevin.
I'm Lucy.
I'm Sarah. Hi, you guys.
Hey, what's going on?
Feels good to be back sitting at the table with you guys.
It's been a while.
Yeah, we had a little break, but now we're back to have another conversation with you. And for this conversation, I was wondering, have you guys seen wild turkeys around Gallatin Valley? Or
I haven't. I don't think so.
we both kind of live in town
Right.
currently, so maybe don't see them as much. I know that I took my mom on a drive north of town, I don't know, a month ago or so, and we were kind of in the Dry Creek area, and we saw some wild turkeys roosting in trees.
Oh, nice.
They're so awesome.
Yeah, they are. I know when we lived in New Hampshire, we saw them all the time. In fact, they would come into our backyard.
Yeah, we live more kind of in the country
Right.
in New Hampshire, and we were blessed to have like 3 acres, and
Yeah, it was nice.
so little turkey families would come through our yard
Yeah.
in New Hampshire. Yeah, let's talk about turkeys today. You may know that Benjamin Franklin was a huge fan of the wild turkey, and in fact, he preferred it to the bald eagle. He wanted the turkey to be our national symbol, our national bird. He called the turkey a much more respectable bird, a bird of courage, and a true original native to America.
Wow.
Also, I learned, interestingly, there's so many cases of this when Europeans came to America and they misnamed things, right? I guess when Europeans came to this country, when they saw the turkey, they thought it was the same species of what they had seen in Turkey, like the guinea fowl that's in Turkey.
Oh,
And so that's why they started calling it the turkey guinea fowl or something. And now it's just been shortened to turkey. So,
interesting.
yeah, did not know that. But yeah, I think the turkey is another misunderstood animal. Like a lot of people either don't know anything about turkeys or they maybe have misconceptions about how awesome they are.
Right.
And when presented with the opportunity to meet turkeys, people are often surprised to discover just how grand they are. Iridescently colored and exquisitely plumed, they frequently have friendly, engaging personalities. They can also be affectionate and have been known to hug, quote, hug humans. Turkey newborns called poults imprint. So this is, I think, common in a lot of different bird species. They imprint or they become attached to a parental figure. Imprinting is irreversible and lasts a lifetime.
That's pretty amazing to hear that. I think chickens do that too, right?
Yeah, and ducks for
Yeah.
sure. I think it's commonly known that ducks do that too. So turkey babies imprint within the first 24 hours after hatching. Babies will call to their mom or whatever parental figure they have imprinted on. They will call to them if they don't see her or them. And this is referred to as the, quote, lost call. So there's a very distinct call that they make when they are missing their parent, their mother. The mother is the center of the young bird's universe. Wild turkey poults are as dependent on a mother or parent substitute as their domesticated counterparts to get a proper start in life. This was a quote by Kieran Davis. She's founder and president of the United Poultry Concerns.
She just died, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did not know that. But yeah, she's basically saying the mother is so important to those babies. And there's all kinds of stories with chickens and turkeys and that they're very sacrificial mothers. They're very protective of their babies. And, you know, there's been cases where predators are flying overhead or even like there's a fire in the structure where they're living or, you know, even bad weather. Like the mother will call to her babies and have them gather under her wings so that she can protect them from whatever danger they're facing. And there was even a story of there was a fire in a barn, and they went in, and like the turkeys, the moms were dead, but the babies were still alive under her wings. So, it's like no greater love has this than someone who lays down their life. Like, we see that behavior in species like chickens, chicken moms and turkey moms.
Wow.
They also, what I think is really interesting, they have these vocalizations that each turkey, first of all, has a unique voice. This is one of the ways that turkeys recognize each other, is they each have a distinct, unique voice. Turkeys, like chickens and other birds, have well-developed vocabularies. Both toms and hens, so the males and the females, make more than 20 distinct vocalizations, including purrs, yelps, and what are called kikis. Each vocalization is very specific with subcategories and slight variations in meaning. Joe Hutto, who is a naturalist, and we'll be talking about him a fair amount today. He's one of the species that he has studied extensively is the wild turkey. He says he always knew when his brood of turkeys had found a rattlesnake because they had a very specific call and applied only to that type of snake. Turkeys can tell the difference between a soaring vulture, eagle, or hawk, and they have a distinct vocal response to each.
Yeah, I was going to say too, I think in his documentary, which I watched, it's called My Life as a Turkey, I think he's counted maybe 30 vocalizations, if I remember correctly.
Awesome.
Because he lived with them basically for about a year.
Yeah, so you watched that documentary. What's it called again?
It's called My Life as a Turkey. It's on PBS. Yeah, you can. It's worth seeing. It's pretty fascinating.
How do you see it? Is it just online or?
Oh, you can get it online at PBS, or you can probably I think you can get it at Amazon. Amazon Prime or whatever. Probably some other places as well. But I think it won an Emmy. I mean, the cinematography is amazing. The story is amazing. Everything about it is fascinating.
Yeah, really, you've sold me. Kevin was telling me all about it this morning, and I was like, yeah, I definitely want to watch that this weekend.
Yeah.
So maybe you guys want to check that out too, our listener.
I just wanted to talk about this because we could qualify that as a language, right? These are specific vocalizations that they basically use as a language with each other. And so often you hear humans say, well, we are the only species with a language, for example, so therefore we're superior and animals don't deserve rights, whatever, things like this. And so it's interesting that so often when you look deeper into these things, this happens and you discover that most people know so little, unfortunately, about these individuals that we think they are a certain way when actually they are quite more similar to us than we
Right.
ever imagined.
Yeah, I mean, this
Right.
sounds like a pretty well-developed language.
Yeah.
Right.
And even if language is not really if someone doesn't have the ability to have language and to speak to others or whatever, to communicate, that shouldn't mean that they shouldn't be respected, right? And
Exactly.
that they
Right.
shouldn't have the right to live and to not be exploited. But
Right.
still, it's interesting to see how that's not even true, that they don't have a language. There's many animals like this. So
Right.
that's pretty cool.
And it does communicate intelligence. Like
Oh,
if these birds are so observant and so intelligent to be able to discern between a vulture, an eagle, a hawk, a rattlesnake versus another kind of snake, like that tells me there's a lot of intelligence going on.
Well, it's interesting too in that documentary. He was sitting there with these turkeys, and they saw a hawk. And what they do is they don't screech out like, "Oh my God, there's a hawk!" Making a vocalization. They do this, and they all know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And it all means "Hey, I see this hawk. Just be aware of it."
It's almost like they're trying to not draw attention to
Right.
themselves.
But they're trying to draw attention to each other.
Yeah.
Like, "Hey, be aware of this thing."
Yeah.
But not make too much noise. And so it's just very interesting. And they're highly intelligent. It's crazy how intelligent they are.
So if I understand right, Kevin, you can correct me since you actually saw the documentary with John Hutto, but he was able to procure some turkey eggs, some fertilized turkey eggs, because he wanted to study them. And when they hatched, well, actually he was communicating with them before they even hatched.
Yeah, a few days or so before they hatch, or maybe a week or so, he's making noises to them, like turkey noises, while they're still in the eggs. And so they're learning to recognize his voice, and they're talking back. They're making noises back to him through the eggs. It's crazy. It's fascinating. And everybody should just watch this documentary. Yes. It's like 50 minutes. It's well worth your time. So then when they hatch, one hatch, it shows this little poulter chick hatching, and it's out of the egg. It's just looking around, and he's looking at it. And then finally he makes the noise. And as soon as he makes the noise, it like puts its head up. It looks right at him, and it crawls right over to him. And then like he holds it, and it rests its face up against his face. And it was just, it knew who he was immediately.
And you're like, you're my mommy.
No, seriously. It was fascinating. And yeah.
So like after watching it, kind of like what were you left with? Like what were some of the highlights for you?
Yeah, there's so many. It was, like I said, everybody should just watch it. I almost don't want to talk about it because I don't want to ruin it for anyone. It's just fascinating. It's like, do you ever watch My Octopus Teacher, and you see this octopus and the way this guy's interacting with it, and you're just it's fascinating. The whole documentary, it's on Netflix. If you haven't seen that, you have to see that. But this is similar in that way. It's like he has these turkeys. At this time he has, of the eggs, I think he might have had 24. I'm not positive, but 16 of them hatched, and so he had 16 poults. And so he's taking them through the woods, walking in the forest with them. And many times, they covered a lot of ground. But what was interesting to me is all the other animals in the forest would come up to the turkeys, and because he was with the turkeys, somehow these other animals recognized it, and they didn't run away. And I'm not talking like other birds and squirrels. Like the wild pigs and deer.
Oh, he's not a predator.
Bears. No, he's not a predator. But somehow they knew that. Somehow they sensed that. And this was happening in Florida. And so there were a lot of snakes and reptiles and turtles and things like this. And these turkeys would just walk up to these turtles. And I guess they're really fascinated with turtles. And what's interesting too is like snakes, like you were saying, they have a special call for rattlesnakes. But the rattlesnakes, they weren't afraid of them, but they knew that the turkeys were in charge. And so, and the one comment he made, and basically what he said was that it opened up this whole world to him. It was like a whole nother dimension. Like he started, just these animals were just there. And like, the way sometimes you see like a baby lamb, like bucking and running and playing, a fawn was doing that and was doing it with a turkey. The turkeys were, one turkey and this fawn were just going back and forth, kind of butting, almost like trying to butt heads like rams do. It was just crazy. But what was interesting was, like, for instance, he says about rattlesnakes, like he said he would only see maybe, I think 2 or 3 rattlesnakes a year. Normally. But when he was with the turkeys, he goes, I didn't realize there were so many rattlesnakes around here. He saw 2 or 3 a day. And so one time a rattlesnake got a little close to where they were, and the turkeys like kind of escorted the rattlesnake like out of their area. Like it walked on both sides of the rattlesnake. Rattlesnake started going away, and they just kind of escorted out. It was crazy. And the rattlesnake didn't strike him or anything. It was crazy. And there were other snakes that, tried to go at him a little bit, and they just jump out of the way, but they were non-venomous snakes. But the whole thing was fascinating. But here's my point. It just opened up this world. If I was left with anything, it was like these two things. Like it opened up this world to him that he never would have had, because it's like the other animals associated him with the turkeys. And so he wasn't a threat, like you said, a predator. But the other thing is when the turkeys finally like left, you know what I mean? When they finally grew up to the point where they're on their own, it's like that window closed. And all of a sudden he said, all of a sudden the snakes disappeared. And like all these other animals weren't there. You know what I mean? Like it was because the turkeys were with him that just opened up this world to him. And he said a world he never would have known or seen had it not been for the turkeys. And he also spoke about their awareness. He even said the turkeys out there in the woods in that environment were more intelligent than he was, like more superior than he was. Like they were more keen, more aware, more conscious of the surroundings than he said he was even capable as a human. And this is kind of what I keep wanting to say. I'd love to have an episode where we're just talking about this. Like we as humans like to judge everything by rationality and intelligence, but that's based on like data and like ideas. But these animals were just, blowing him out of the water in terms of their keenness. And the one thing he said is they really lived in the moment. He said he learned almost like, so I'm going to say it was like a meditation, but he made it sound like they lived more in the present than any human ever could. And he said their memory was fascinating. Like they knew their area. They knew like they had a great memory, but they didn't live in the future and they didn't live in the past. They just lived in the present. It was a lesson for everybody. I mean,
like what a commitment he made. Because
huge.
didn't he actually have to end up sleeping kind of together with them?
Yeah,
especially when they were
when they were young. And then at one point, and again, I don't want to even give anything away, but at one point, he was even trying to teach them how to roost. Like he'd get up on a log and like trying to get them to come up on the log with him and like just try and roost. Because I guess when they sleep, they roost. And so at some point one night, maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 months in, he opened the door to the pen that they were staying in and they didn't go in. And they jumped up in a tree, and then they started roosting outside up in a tree, which is how they sleep. So yes, for a while he had to sleep with them. He couldn't leave their side. He talked about that because they imprinted on him.
Right.
He couldn't leave their side. And there's a thing in there I don't want to say, but he went into his house one night, and I'll just say a snake came in, and you should watch it. But he learned from that he cannot leave them while they were young, and so he would kind of sleep. Yeah. With them, near them. Anyway,
it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it was huge. It was amazing.
So turkeys also communicate their emotions to each other through their voices, as we've been talking about. But also, they're really unique in that they change colors with their emotions.
Well, their head.
Yeah. So their snood, which is that fleshy part that kind of hangs down from their forehead, it's featherless, and the head and the neck change color according to their emotional state. And of course, the snood is used by the toms to attract a mate. So as we know, birds have elaborate, little dances and little songs they sing, and they with turkeys they strut around and kind of swing their snoot around, and this is how they communicate that they're ready to find a mate, and they attract a mate that way. So a lot of people don't realize, I think, that turkeys can fly. They fly up to 55 miles an hour for short bursts, like basically 100 yards. And they roost in trees, like Kevin was saying. So that's how they protect themselves from nocturnal predators,
right,
by sleeping up in the trees, which when we were learning about the ancestors of our modern day domesticated chickens, we also learned that the guinea fowl, they roost in trees as well. So yeah, their heads can change from blue to red to white depending on how excited or calm they are. The more intense the color, the more intense the emotions. Eyesight, they have 3 times better eyesight than humans. They see in color as we do, but they also can see UV light.
Right. A lot of birds can. Isn't that crazy? Birds can see colors that we cannot.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Their eyesight covers 270 degrees compared to humans who have like 180 degree vision. So theirs is quite a bit, almost 360 degrees.
Wow, that's crazy.
270 degrees they can see. So again, Joe Hutto says, the most important activity of a young wild turkey is the acquisition and assimilation of information. They are curious to a fault. They want a working understanding of every aspect of their surroundings, and their memory is impeccable. They gather specific information about a particular environment, conspicuously apply that information to a framework of general knowledge, and make appropriate choices in modifying their behavior. Turkeys learn the precise details of an area larger than 1,000 acres over the course of a year. They're very perceptive and acutely aware if something in their environment changes.
Yeah, think about that. I saw that too. Imagine if we owned that much, I guess, land. Could we get to know 1,000 acres?
Every detail and notice if something had changed.
Right. And that's it. They could perceive changes in the environment.
Similar to peacocks, male turkeys puff up their bodies and spread their elaborate feathers to attract a mate. And they are intelligent and affectionate animals who enjoy having their feathers stroked and are able to recognize the faces and voices of people.
Right.
As well. So pretty awesome birds. Pretty awesome. Like their abilities, their intelligence, their language. They love to forage. And, I think when we see the natural state, the way they evolved or the way they were created, however you want to frame that,
right,
They are just gorgeous, beautiful, majestic. Like you have like this reverence for them when you actually stop and look and learn a little
Right.
bit about them.
And it's interesting too. They're all, like you said, they're unique. Their voices, the way they look, their personalities, but also their interests, right? Because on this documentary, some of them just were very enamored with squirrels. Like just every time I saw a squirrel, it just went over there. Not all of them, but there were two of them. And then a couple of them were really interested in tortoises. But in that book we have, The Inner World of Farm Animals by Amy Hatkoff, I believe. She talks about how one of them was really into wheels. So if people would come to this sanctuary, a farm sanctuary with strollers, the one turkey come running up. And of course the parents were like, oh my God, this turkey's going to hurt it. No, the turkey just wanted to walk next to the stroller. Or someone came in a wheelchair. Like they would sit next to the person in the wheelchair and this one turkey just loved wheels. Like
It's a fascinating invention.
What a nerd.
I know. He was ahead of his time.
He's like, this changed the course of human history. This invention of wheels. So I think it's good to know how turkeys are in the wild, just know a little bit about them before we start talking about the modern domesticated turkey, which of course is a descendant of the natural wild turkey. Because when we stop and look at what they are naturally compared to what we've done to them in the agribusiness, I think it's a stark contrast. It puts it in great relief. You can't deny, the perspective is that, wow, what have we done? Because, first of all, turkeys are bred, drugged, and genetically manipulated to grow as large as possible, as quickly as possible. This started back at least in the 1930s, figuring out how to manipulate animals like turkeys to grow as large as possible, as quickly as possible. There was genetic manipulation. There was manipulation of how much light and darkness. There was, all kinds of ways they have done that. In 1970, the average turkey raised for meat weighed 17 pounds. So let's figure this out. So like in 1970, the average turkey on market was a 17-pound turkey. Today, turkeys average 28 pounds. So from 17 pounds to 28 pounds, like that's almost doubling their size.
That's crazy.
And their weight. This causes all kinds of suffering. This causes all kinds of health problems. Because they're bred to be so enormous, their breast meat is bred to be so unnaturally large, they are incapable of breeding anymore. So the modern domesticated turkey is incapable of reproducing naturally. So turkey breeders artificially inseminate turkeys. Workers have to stimulate the male turkeys to, quote, milk semen from them. And
The wording.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the semen is propelled into the hens with the use of a syringe. As soon as the hen lays an egg, she's inseminated again. So again, you see this in dairy or in so many arenas of agribusiness. It's like there's no rest. It's just let's maximize how much we can get out of this animal.
And, they're forcefully inseminated, right? Impregnated. So we have to stop there a little bit and think, what would we call that if we forcefully inseminated a human?
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty gruesome. And it's, you have to ask yourself as we go through this, like, does this really sound okay? And what gives us the right to think that we can do this to anybody?
Right.
So she's put through this cycle of insemination, laying an egg, insemination, laying an egg, for about 25 weeks, at which point she is spent. Her biology just starts to give out. And this is according to the National Turkey Federation, which is agriculture group. So at this point, she's either sent off to slaughter, or many farms and only in the United States is this allowed. This is not allowed in the EU or Canada even. But what a lot of farms in America do is they put the turkey through forced molting, is what they call it. Now, molting, of course, is a natural process in all birds where they shed and they renew their feathers. And during the molt, naturally, the reproductive physiology of the bird is allowed a complete rest from laying. And the body is able to build back its reserves of nutrients during molting. So this is a natural, rejuvenative process that birds go through where their bodies get to rest. Because keep in mind, as we learned in our egg episode, birds lose a ton of nutrients. A lot of their bone, they lose like 10% of their bone calcium every time they lay an egg. So there's this natural process of molting once a year where the reproductive system just shuts down and gets to heal itself and renew itself. Well, the farmers use this thing called forced molting. And again, I want to point out, in turkeys naturally, a molting is a leisurely 3 months long to go through a molt. But in the practice of forced molting, turkeys and egg-laying chickens are put into complete darkness with no food or water for the first 72 hours. So that's, 3 days? 3 days of no food or water, complete darkness. And then they continue this complete darkness, and they give them no food for another 7 to 14 days.
So why do they do that exactly?
Yeah, great question. So basically, in order for the molting, what they're trying to do is get the kind of reset the reproductive system so she'll start laying good eggs again, because she's been so used so heavily that, the egg shells start to become thin and all kinds of problems start. And she starts laying fewer and fewer eggs. And so they're trying to reset that biology. And so normally, let me just read from this site. So for a complete recovery of the reproductive tract, the hen's body weight must drop by 30 to 35% during the forced molt. So again, they typically achieve that by withdrawing the hen's feed for 7 to 14 days, sometimes up to 28 days. So this is a food fast, or basically a water fast that they put this bird through in complete darkness, which they hate, being in complete darkness 24/7, for up to 4 weeks. And it kind of tricks the physiology somehow into resetting. So then they can bring her right back out. And now that she's lost all this weight, this poor bird has suffered enough. And now they're just going to, now that they've stimulated egg production again, they can start to artificially inseminate her again immediately.
Wow.
Some other things to consider with this forced molting: you're radically traumatizing, manipulating the biology of these turkey hens. This forced molting practice increases plasma corticosterone, which, along with related hormones, decreases the levels of circulating lymphocytes and other leukocytes. Basically, you are reducing the effectiveness of the bird's immune system. And this means that these turkeys, being forced molted, become susceptible to diseases, particularly salmonella infections. And the site I'm reading this, or the source I'm reading this from, says, and may produce contaminated eggs, thereby compromising public health. And so to me, it's always so sad a little bit that, let's take that seriously. This is why this should not be allowed in the United States, and it should be banned, just like it's been banned in the EU. And it should be, this practice of forced molting is a hazard to public health. Well, that's all well and good to care about public health. But what about, this is just wrong on a fundamental level. We should not be creating these Frankenstein monster creatures and then manipulating them so heavily and so without mercy just to get a few more eggs out of them before we send them to slaughter It's just, it all just feels like, what about this feels right?
It's completely unnecessary exploitation.
Right.
Like, you don't need to use them.
But I feel like we saw this in the dairy industry too, and the egg industry, and all the industries. I mean, if you're constantly putting animals into overdrive, you're going to compromise their immune system. It's just going to happen.
Yeah.
They're not robots.
Right.
Right. They're not machines. They are actually,
even if they're treated
beings.
like machines.
They're treated like machines.
Right.
Yeah, we're treating them exactly like we would a machine, and they're not.
Right.
So these eggs laid by the breeder hens are shipped from the insemination facility to a hatching facility. And at the hatchery, thousands of eggs are put into large incubators set for high speed with bright lights and optimal heat and humidity. So again, they're trying to hatch them as fast as they can. The baby turkeys will hatch in less than 1 month. And I mean, of course, if you've been listening since the beginning of this episode, what comes to mind immediately is, wait, when they hatch, they're going to be looking to find a parent. They're going to be looking to find their mother. They are designed to imprint on a parental figure. Well, they never even meet their mothers.
Right.
Their mothers have probably been sent to slaughter, or they're still back at the insemination facility getting inseminated.
Right.
So, I mean, it's heartbreaking. It should be heartbreaking to think about these babies being born into the world and looking to imprint on a mother, and there's no mother in sight. So they're probably making that lost call.
How messed up is that?
It's terrible. So baby turkey chicks are hatched in large incubators. They never see their mothers. To keep these stressed turkeys from killing each other once they get to the sheds where they're going to just spend the rest of their lives getting fattened up, to keep those stressed turkeys from killing each other, these newborn poults, well, the first thing that happens to them is they will have parts of their toes, their beaks, and as well as the fleshy snood all cut off. Because these animals are so stressed and so pressed into each other and so afraid, they end up turning on each other. And, so to kind of keep that down to a minimum, one of the things they do is they just start cutting parts of their bodies off so that they can't injure each other.
Right.
And to reiterate something that we said in our chicken egg episode, their beaks are very sensitive. It's one of the most sensitive parts of their entire body.
Right.
It's their sensory organ for exploring their world.
Right.
And so having their snood and their toes and their beaks just cut off without painkillers.
Right. Well, same thing. Yeah. We talked about this with chickens. Same thing with pigs, right? They cut their tails off. It's just a constant thing. I know even cows, they snip their tails for, I think, sanitary reasons, but they crop
sheep
them.
as well, like their bones.
Yeah, it's like, what the hell are we doing?
Mutilation, yeah.
Yeah. At a few weeks old, they are moved to large windowless sheds which they share with up to 55,000 other turkeys. So the scale of these farms is mind-blowing. This is where they will stay for the rest of their short, miserable lives. Workers are free to treat the turkeys however they wish. They are not protected. Poultry are not protected in any way legally. They are not able to practice, the turkeys are not able to practice any of their natural behaviors. So if you think about their mating behaviors, their flying and roosting behaviors, their foraging behaviors, their all of those things that we saw in the wild turkeys, these birds never get to do their natural behaviors because of the artificial manipulation that makes them so much heavier than their natural weight. Turkeys' legs often break beneath them. They're growing so fast, so big, so fast that their legs break. They can't even bear their own weight. And of course, they can't jump, and of course, they can't fly. The unnatural weight also causes them to regularly experience organ failure. So in these large sheds, because of all these health problems and the stress that they're under, et cetera, there are always a lot of dead birds laying around. And they end up getting discarded. But it's worth noting that injured turkeys and diseased turkeys are still deemed safe for human consumption. That should give you a little...
Seriously.
Like... that the turkey that you're buying, and this is true definitely of a lot of animals, all the animals in agribusiness, is that you don't know what diseases and what injuries and what open wounds, infected wounds they had when they went to slaughter. Yeah, so according to the USDA, diseased and injured turkeys are still deemed safe for human consumption. And a lot of them are injured and sick.
It's worth noting, too, that many are saying the next pandemic is going to be a swine flu or an avian flu.
Mm-hmm.
What's the percentage again of diseases like from animals?
Oh, zoonotic diseases?
Yes.
75% of the diseases that humans get are considered to be zoonotic. COVID was zoonotic.
Coming from our treatment of animals.
Come from
consuming animals.
Yeah, proximity to animals, eating animals, food preparation, that kind of thing.
So they spend their short lives packed tightly body to body on floors covered with dead turkeys and feces. The sheds are kept dark to reduce the turkeys' activity. So this is another way they're keeping them from fighting and injuring themselves and trying to escape and all these things. They keep them pretty dark all the time, which kind of has a sedative effect. But again, turkeys or all birds are so tuned into the light. You know, their body rhythms and physiology are so in tune with the amount of light every day. To keep them in complete darkness or near complete darkness every day is really inhumane. Modern farming has been able to manipulate the growth of turkeys genetically, but it still takes 80 pounds of feed to produce a 30-pound turkey. So even with all of the advancements in agribusiness, think about that, to create a 30-pound turkey, which is an enormous turkey, it still takes them 80 pounds of feed to get that size of bird. So we're wasting all of this food, giving it to a turkey, and then a lot of it is excreted or ends up being whatever.
Well, of course, it makes me wonder about how much water that takes, too. And again, we're going to get into this in a future episode where we talk about protein, but the return on investment here is horrible. We don't need a middleman. We don't need to feed the animals the food so that we can eat the animals. We can just eat the feed. We can, we can
eat the grain.
Yep.
They're also, of course, fed antibiotics. And, keep in mind that 70% of our antibiotics are fed to farm animals. And that causes all kinds of other problems with antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So at 14 to 18 weeks old, that's as long as they get to live.
That's crazy.
At 14 to 18 weeks old, turkeys are sent to slaughter. And keep in mind, in the wild, turkeys live on average 10 years. So at just a few weeks old, they are sent off to slaughter. And I wanted to read from Jonathan Safran Foer's, one of his books called Eating Animals. And he kind of writes that book around the Thanksgiving question. He's kind of like, what is Thanksgiving? Why is it such a powerful tradition? And what are we going to serve for Thanksgiving? This is a quote in his book given by a person that he went with this person to a farm, a turkey farm, and they went in and he describes what they saw in there. And then he allowed this person who remains nameless in the book, but he interviews them. And this is one of the things they said. These factory farmers calculate how close to death they can keep the animals without killing them. That's the business model. How quickly can they be made to grow? How tightly they can be packed? How much or little can they eat? How sick they can get without dying? What the industry figured out, and this was the real revolution, is that you don't need healthy animals to make a profit. Sick animals are more profitable. The animals have paid the price for our desire to have everything available at all times for very little money. These big turkey factories have incinerators to burn all the turkeys that die every day. Or people don't care to hear that when the industry sends turkeys off to be processed, it knows and accepts that it's going to lose 10 to 15% of them in transport. They're dead on arrival at the plant.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, this is focusing on factory farms specifically, which if you go to the grocery store and you buy a turkey, basically 99% of all the animals that are eaten come from factory farms. That's just the reality. But we do want to always point out that even if a turkey was raised in the ideal environment and was treated with kindness every day of his or her life, the fact that we think we have a right to end their life at a fraction of what their normal lifespan would be, the fact that we think that we have the right to take their very lives from them, even if they were raised, quote, humanely, doesn't make it any more right.
Right.
But yeah, the factory farm is where 99% of consumed animals are having to exist.
Pretty sad.
And of course, the trip to the slaughterhouse can take days without food or water. And when they get to the slaughterhouse, turkeys are hung upside down by their legs, which often break in the process if they're not broken already. Their heads are dunked into electrified water to stun them. And then their throats are slit with a mechanical blade, which often misses. And then they are dunked into scalding hot water to defeather them. And many workers have testified that the stunning, getting dunked into the electrified water, often does not properly stun them. The mechanical blade that is supposed to slit their throat often misses. And then a lot of them are scalded to death, fully conscious.
Damn.
And this is considered just, what do we call it?
Humane?
It's called like normal farming
Standard.
practices. This all falls under standard practices. In the U.S., 46 million turkeys are killed for Thanksgiving alone.
That's crazy.
That's only about 29% of the turkeys that are killed annually, according to the National Turkey Federation.
Jeez.
In industrial animal factories, turkeys know nothing of a natural life. The goal of industrial farming is to manipulate an animal's nature to make them grow as fast as possible with the least expense. For turkeys, this flawed equation involves intense confinement, genetic engineering, and a series of painful mutilations. Turkeys raised for meat bear little resemblance to their wild ancestors. The industry has no regard for the animal's instincts or general well-being. They are treated strictly as a commodity. So again, I mean, when you think about what we've done to them, they are bred to suffer. Like they are prisoners in their own bodies.
Right.
Their bodies have been so manipulated to be so unnatural.
Right. No, from the moment they're born into slavery, and then they're murdered. It's crazy.
I just wanted to add up, just to put it into perspective, France, where I'm from, is like 67 million people. 49 million turkeys for Thanksgiving in the U.S.
Wow. Yeah, the scale is something that I still feel like I don't have my head around.
I can't even picture anything when it comes to the numbers of animals.
Yeah, we should try to figure it out.
Like you hear...
They say like 2.7 trillion animals are killed in animal agriculture every year. Like it's including fish. Basically, they count fish per pound. Yeah. They deduct the lives from the pounds of fish. That's why like there's way more fish than any other animal that's killed and exploited every year. Yeah.
I've heard quotes like, if humans were killed at the rate we're killing non-human animals, the human population would be wiped out in a weekend, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't think people, when you really stop and think about, how many animals the average person consumes in a week, or portions of it, or all the restaurants, the Arby's and et cetera, like you do start to think like, oh my goodness, like this is so much bigger than any of us want to even think about or fathom just the scale of it. But, there are such things as farm animal sanctuaries, farmed animals that are rescued out of the agribusiness, and they are in a sanctuary, and these are around the country and probably around the world. People devote their lives to creating a farm, but it's not a farm.
Yeah,
so take that out. people devote their lives to creating this sanctuary for these animals to come and just live out their natural lives,
Right.
unharassed, given, just basic medical care and food and water and companionship. And so there are these amazing, I've never personally visited a farmed animal sanctuary yet, but I definitely would love to. And
There's one in Helena, by the way, guys.
yeah, we need to check this out.
Road trip. We need to take a
Yeah.
road trip with a mic.
But the turkeys that are rescued onto farmed animal sanctuaries display immense affection towards humans. They love to be caressed. People often remark that they respond just like their own dogs and cats. Turkeys even make a purring sound when they are content. Some turkeys climb into people's laps and make themselves comfortable. At Farm Sanctuary in California, a turkey named Lydia would run over to everyone and press her body against them. As soon as the person would crouch down, Lydia would crane her head over their shoulder, clucking all the while. It's amazing how so generous a hug can be given by someone with no arms, said somebody. Alice, a turkey who lives at the Poplar Spring Animal Sanctuary in Maryland, loves to join all the tours and walk around the whole sanctuary with everyone that comes to visit. She would get excited when the tour buses came and would run to the top of the hill to wait for the kids to come out of the bus. One time, the kids were acting up and the teacher ordered them to get in a single file line and back onto the bus. To everyone's surprise, Alice got in line and marched right onto the bus with all the kids.
I'm going with you.
She's like, I know what's going on. You don't mind me. So as we draw near to the holiday season, and I know tradition is very powerful, but it is time to at least stop and think and reevaluate what we accept in our traditions and what kind of traditions we want to pass on. And by choosing to live vegan, we can transform our food system and improve human health and safeguard our planet and improve the lives of billions of farmed animals, including turkeys. I'd like to close my part of this just with a quote, again, going back to Joe Hutto. He said, "If I had to sum up my experience with the wild turkey, the most profound thing that I discovered is that they are so much more complex in their intelligence, their behavior, and their problem-solving ability than I ever imagined. They are sentient beings by every measure and every definition of intelligence. In their environment and in their world, they were without question so much more intelligent than I was. The time I spent with them was this wonderful kind of humiliation. We are not superior beings. We are just different beings."
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Well said. Well said, Joe Hutto.
I would love to meet him.
Yeah.
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 He sounds like he's had an amazing life
Right.
with animals.
100%. All right. And with, like Sarah was saying, tradition and Thanksgiving, I think a vegan tradition would be every vegan would watch Gary Yourofsky's famous, the most important speech you will ever hear. I think every vegan, I could probably say every vegan is familiar with his speech.
Yeah, this is the video that caused me to go vegan.
Same.
Yeah.
Right.
2 out of 3 here.
Yeah, he's a wonderful person. I'm thankful for him.
Right.
And this video is available for free on YouTube.
Right. We have permission to use this. So, and exactly, it is free. So, I guess without further ado, we're just going to play the section about Thanksgiving from Gary Yourofsky.
I am not going to let you off that easy while I got you here today. You know, we top this all off, in my opinion, because every November, during that certain holiday people love so much, people take a dead turkey, open up the dead turkey's ass, or carve out a really big hole in their ass, take some stuffing and shove it inside their dead empty ass, and use their little dead ass as an oven to bake some bread. Somebody else's dead, empty, bacteria-laden ass to make bread? Ass bread? And people think vegans are weird because we eat tofu and rice and beans and lentils. I tell people one of my favorite meals nowadays, yams. Boy, dish me up a plate of yams for dinner and I'm a happy guy. I know how most people are though. I tell them this, they're like, "But you just eat yams for dinner?" I don't know, man, it's kind of weird. Okay. But somebody else's rib cage sitting on your plate isn't weird, doesn't make you think twice. Severed legs, sliced up thighs and mutilated breasts sitting on your plate doesn't make you think twice. And you want to know why? Those blinders are on nice and tightly, aren't they? And I bet most of you were perturbed at me when the speech began and I accused everybody of having blinders on. I am not here to be your enemy. I am here to call you out, though. You might have had a pretty good excuse before I got here of being uninformed and misinformed. Okay. That's fair. Honestly, well, I was the same way for a long time. I'm kind of curious, though. What's the excuse now? You got a choice today. When you leave this room, you can choose to be radically kind. Never to intentionally harm another animal for breakfast, lunch, or dinner ever again. And these creatures have never harmed you, violated you, or taken advantage of you in any way, shape, or form. The least you can do is return the favor. Or you can stay radically cruel. Keep the status quo as is. Make sure animals have no freedom. Make sure they never experience one drop of human kindness. Make sure their babies are stolen from them. Make sure their beaks are sliced off, their horns are cut off, and their testicles ripped out. Make sure there's a knife in their throat every second of every day for eternity. I really hope you'll make the right choice. I want to wrap this speech up so we can do our Q&A.
All right. So Gary Horofsky, pretty bold.
Yeah.
Awesome guy.
Bold is definitely the understatement.
Right.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for the work that he has done.
Yeah, massive.
Before we wrap up the show today, we did want to mention a little update on Wayne Sheng, because we talked about him just a little bit on our last episode. We were talking about ag-gag laws and activists who end up getting sued for rescuing animals from farms and getting them medical attention and get them rescued to a sanctuary. Wayne Sheng is an attorney, but he's also an animal rights activist. And he, his most recent case that he was in Sonoma County, California. And he was being tried, along with, I believe, some others, for rescuing birds from an egg-laying facility and also a duck meat facility. And by the way, these are both facilities that supply Whole Foods grocery stores.
Interesting.
And as you know, Whole Foods always has certified humane stickers on all of their animal flesh and things like that. But in these facilities, they found egregious animal suffering, animals starving, injured animals that couldn't move, languishing, dying, dead animals. Some of them who couldn't reach the food and were too sick or injured to reach the food were actually cannibalizing each other alive.
Wow.
So they had footage and all of this evidence, which the judge would not allow into the court. So they kind of went in with their hands tied. They couldn't explain why they were doing what they were doing. And Wayne was found guilty on all the charges except for one, which was a hung jury. So he's going to have to go to court again. So he's been held in the Sonoma County Jail since early November, and he's waiting his sentencing trial on November 30th, and is facing up to, I believe, 10 years in prison.
Yeah.
For
And
rescuing.
For rescuing. You can write him at dxe.io/write-to-Wayne. Put that in your URL and you will find the requirements of how you can write him if you want to.
Yeah, I think we're going to try to write him a letter this week.
Yeah.
Just to kind of encourage him.
Yeah, so you can find all of our episodes on YouTube at Animalia Hour, and we're also on Instagram, on Spotify, and on TikTok.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening.
Yes, thanks for joining us today. Have a good
Thanks,
day.
guys. Bye.